Hey everyone, welcome back to RV Unfiltered. If you watched my previous video, you already know what a shadow is, how it is formed, and how it can silently shape our thoughts, reactions, and patterns without us even realizing it. But here's the thing, you can't heal or integrate what you can't first see. That's why in today's video, we're diving into the six simplest and most powerful ways to actually identify your shadow aspects. Let's get started. Now, the easiest way to spot your shadows is to pay attention to your emotional triggers and see what kind of unconscious beliefs, fears, or conditioning are you projecting onto others. Now, I can understand what you're thinking. You're wondering what a projection actually is, right? See, think of a projection just like a literal projector, like how a projector would function in real life. Just like how a file or video or folder is projected from a laptop onto a bigger screen, our outer world or outer reality that we experience is oftentimes a projection of our inner world or inner reality. So it basically suggests that we perceive the external events, people, and situations through the lens of our own unconscious thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So now that we've explored an example with a girl called Mira, let's explore what she could have been projecting onto others when she was having the self-worth aspect in her shadow. Now she could have been holding belief systems around low self-worth, that she doesn't deserve true love, that she is not good enough, and so on. So what's happening here? These beliefs are being projected onto others through her expressions. Like what kind of expressions? She could not have strong boundaries, she would not know how to stand up for herself, she would hesitate to stand in her own power, she would allow people to take her for granted, and so on. So, what happens when she behaves in such ways towards other people? And what do? They reflect it back to her. How? So, they'd be thinking, like, it's just Mira, she's not going to say anything, we can take her for granted. And so, they would end up taking her for granted. So, what has happened here? Her own beliefs that she isn't good enough, that she doesn't deserve respect, and so on, is being reflected back by people on the other end. And this is exactly how people reflect your shadow aspects back to you. Now, let's move on to the second way in which we can spot our shadow. So, the second way in which we can spot our shadow is by paying attention to the repeated patterns and habits in our life. You go to retrospect on whether you're attracting the same kind of patterns or problems into your life. If you do, question yourself as to why that happens. Most often than not, they might be pointing out to unconscious beliefs or traits you haven't accepted in yourself. Again, I'll give you an example from my own personal life to help you understand how you can spot your shadow using this method. So, for the longest time, I found myself struggling with procrastination, and I really wasn't able to understand why I was going through it, why I was behaving the way I did, why I kept procrastinating things. All I knew was I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed whenever I got myself to sit down and work. But why was I exactly feeling that way? I was not able to figure out until recently. So even while starting this channel, since this channel is new, I found myself emphasizing on wanting everything to be perfect or wanting to master everything, from the beginning. So I end up spending a lot of time trying to learn this skill, trying to learn that skill, and actually not taking the step to get myself to a start point where I started recording videos. So I was stuck. I was stuck for a really long time, constantly trying to learn this thing or that thing. And the reason I was giving myself was okay, I'm a beginner, I don't know things, right? So I've got to learn these things, I've got to master these things so that when I start, I can move smoothly from that point onward. But what I was failing to realize was that learning is a never ending process, right? It can go on forever. So if you try to sit down and perfect every little thing that is out there, it's going to be a never ending process, and I would never reach a point where I find the courage to start recording, right? So what really was the issue that I was facing here was I was not ready to face myself at the point in which I was, which is the beginner stage, right? So I realized that I needed to embrace that beginner or noob side of me as much as I loved and embraced the perfectionist side of me, right? Because without this stage, without stepping into this stage, you cannot reach that stage. So the perfectionist stage is a stage that you reach after stepping into the stage and after gaining that experience, after mastering whatever you need to master. Nothing's going to happen from the very beginning. So we need to be okay with that more, right? we need to be okay with being mediocre in the beginning. See, I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to perfect things. I'm just saying that we should be okay in accepting the fact that in the beginning we are not going to master everything. Okay, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes patience from our side, and it's very important that we strike a line of balance in between these two. It's very important that we don't hit either of these extremes. So if you're only constantly focusing on the perfectionist side of us and constantly trying to perfect things, we're not going to be okay embracing that beginner side of us or the noob side of us, right? And things cannot work like that, right? We all have things that we haven't mastered. We all have things that we aren't aware of. We all have things that we will be stepping into as newbies, and nobody can reach that level of perfection from day one in that very thing that you're stepping into from day one. So if you're going to be rejecting this newbie or noob version of you or side of you from yourself and only embracing that perfectionist side of you, then I think obviously you're pushing this side into the shadow, and this shadow aspect is going to be expressing itself through these things like procrastination, that feeling of feeling overwhelmed because you want to be perfect but you cannot be perfect, and so on. Okay, so the third way in which you can spot your shadow is by journaling. Okay, journaling is a great tool that will help you get in touch with your subconscious or unconscious, because it gives your unconscious a safe space to speak. When you start writing freely without censoring yourself, you start to notice thoughts, patterns, or feelings you didn't even know were there. And these little slips, recurring themes, and intense emotional reactions will most probably be clues pointing out to your shadow. And with time, you will notice that you are always getting triggered by the same fears or insecurities. Or maybe you catch yourself judging others in ways that reveal something deeper about yourself. So, the more consistently you journal, the clearer your shadow becomes and the easier it gets to bring it to light. Here are some shadow work prompts that you can use to do your own shadow work. What qualities in others trigger or annoy me the most, and why? When was the last time I felt really judged or rejected? What did I make that mean about me? What part of myself do I try to hide from others, and why? What emotions do I try to avoid or suppress the most? In what situations do I feel the need to be perfect, and what am I afraid will happen if I'm not? So the next way to spot your shadow is by paying attention to the childhood events. For this, you can try recalling times you were shamed or told to be a certain way, because those moments obviously would reveal a part of you that could have been pushed into the shadow. The next way in which you can spot your shadow is by paying attention to all kinds of your emotions, be it judgment, be it triggers, be it things that upset you, or even resentment. Now, all these things could very much be an expression of a hidden shadow aspect. So, it's very important that you ask yourself these very basic questions, which is, what am I feeling exactly? Why am I feeling it? And what kind of belief systems, conditioning, or stories are attached to this emotion that I'm feeling? Now, when you ask yourself these questions, you will be able to bring that hidden shadow aspect into your conscious awareness, work through it, and integrate it. Now, let me give you an example here. Now, let's say, for example, someone from my inner circle or from my family have ridiculed me when I was crying, labeling me as emotional or too sensitive. Now, as I was growing up, as a way to fit in myself into the family or the inner circle that I was mostly attached to, I tried to reject that part of myself and try to put on a mask as though I'm not someone who's really very emotional or vulnerable. So I've rejected this part of myself, and after some time, maybe after a few decades, this part of me has gone into my shadow. And after a few years, let's say I see someone being emotional and vulnerable, and I judge that person, okay? I look at that person and say, oh my god, this person is too weak. You're a grown up man, you're a grown up woman, why are you crying? Okay, so I start forming these kind of judgments in my mind. But why do you think this is happening? This judgment is nothing but a projection of the emotional side I've pushed into my unconscious. And since I've gotten into the practice of judging and suppressing my own emotional side for being emotional, I also end up doing the same towards others. So, this is why it's very important to catch ourselves when we form a judgment about somebody else, because that very judgment often holds answer to a part of ourselves that we have rejected or hidden from our own conscious awareness. Now let's look at an example for a positive judgment. Let's say I catch myself adoring someone like anything, okay? Because this is also a form of judgment, right? It's just a positive judgment that you project onto others. Let's say I like a celebrity. Now, to be very honest, I for real have a celebrity that I adore. Let's take the example of MIA, okay, who's a British Sri Lankan pop star. So she's very, very courageous, okay? So the first time I watched her documentary, I was like, oh my god, she is such a bold, strong, assertive, opinionated woman who hasn't shied away from sharing her opinions, irrespective of whether they were received well or not. She always puts out political opinions very, very boldly, in spite of the fact that she's in the music industry, and not many pop stars or musicians actually, share their opinions when it comes to these things about political views and stuff. So I found her to be a very, very strong woman, and I liked her for that. And the kind of music she makes. She always makes sure that her music has some encoded messages, like be it bad girls, borders, or paper planes. There was always an underlying message in her music. So whenever I looked at her, these were the things that I loved about her. So when I was doing shadow work, I was actually paying attention to the celebrities that I was adoring and why I liked them. I was actually diving deep into all these things. The reason why I adored this celebrity was because I, on some level, have suppressed that kind of courageousness within me. Because that was something I found out I had denied while I was growing up. Because of the fears that I had held on to, like fear of being punished, fear of being silenced. When we were in school, we were always kind of taught to be the nice girl, not get into any problems, and not get into trouble basically. So we kind of suppressed our own voice by doing that, right? Since I have suppressed my own voice and I had stopped being opinionated, when I actually saw someone embodying that aspect so effortlessly and so beautifully, I obviously adored them, right? Because somewhere on some level, that shadow aspect within me seeks to be integrated. Shadow. Now that we've seen this example, it would be easier for us to understand the next way in which we can spot a shadow, which is by paying attention to what kind of movies, TV shows, and cartoons we are attracted to since childhood. As we said, as with the adoration example, you can pay attention to what kind of celebrities you are attracted to, you are drawn to, you kind of adore, and start retrospecting what aspect of them draws my attention. And most often than not, it might reveal an aspect of you that you could have rejected or suppressed in yourself. And as I explained earlier, this is the very reason you often put them on a pedestal. It's because you're unconsciously yearning to embody and integrate that particular aspect back into your conscious awareness. So we've come to the end of the video. These are the ways in which you can spot your shadow aspects, work through them, and integrate them. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments which of these signs showed up for you the most. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and reach others who are on a similar journey.